What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's Brandon with Campbell Fitness, and today what we're going to be talking about is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. This is kind of the go-to book or Bible, if you will, for most people who first get interested in bodybuilding. Whether it's something that you've checked out at the library, whether it's something you've seen in a gym, maybe one of your friends have, or maybe you actually own it yourself. I figured I'd go ahead and give you guys a brief overview on this book and its usefulness about information and ways to get into bodybuilding. Now first, just some basic background about Arnold Schwarzenegger in case you for some reason don't know who he is. But he won the title of Mr. Universe at age 20 and he went on to win 7 Mr. Olympias. He's been in tons of movies, he's been the governor of California, and he's kind of looked at as the main person who really ushered the bodybuilding era into the United States. So this is his take on everything from A to Z about bodybuilding, from getting into it, from lifting to training to diet to posing. And although it is a little bit out of date as far as the information goes in here and the actual science behind it, it's still a great book to actually read and look to, not only for information, but as well as motivation. So without further ado, let's get into it and take a look at what's included in this book.
All right, so the first thing we're going to start off here was the evolution and history of bodybuilding. This is really interesting because one of the benefits that this book does is it gives you a brief overview of the history of bodybuilding. And it's really interesting to see some of the pictures, as you can see here, where it all started. Now, compared to bodybuilders of today, these guys are nowhere near the same size. So that's why I think it's really interesting, because honestly, this probably gives you a more realistic expectation of what you can see with the results from hard work. Now again, one of the things to consider, which is going to be a consistent theme throughout this book, is the fact that even though this is a modern encyclopedia of bodybuilding, a lot of this is still out of date, and they don't know half as much as what we know now about nutrition, supplementation, and training philosophies. But again, it's still really interesting to see some of the ways where people came from. Now here you have Charles Atlas, who's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of people got into bodybuilding so much in the 60s and 70s. He was one of the guys to start kicking it off. Seen a lot of his advertisements in old-time comic books and things like that. And again, it's really interesting to me to the fact that this is what really people looked up to. And again, compared to today's standards, you wouldn't really even consider this guy really a bodybuilder. A lot of you guys would probably ask, does he even lift? Now, as we continue on here through the history of bodybuilding, you'll see some guys that might start to make sense to you. Here you have Reg Park on the left, who was the inspiration for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you'll also start to get to see other guys here. You see Dave Draper. You see Sergio Oliva. And then it gets into more modern bodybuilders, Arnold, and so forth. That leads us into chapter 2, which is the ABCs of bodybuilding. And it just starts talking about the basics of bodybuilding as far as lifting, progressive resistance training you'll see, bodybuilding physique, how the training works, the difference between bodybuilding and aerobic endurance, and how they correlate together. Here you see Frank Zane and his wife jogging, talking about a lot of good stuff here. The next chapter here we have is the training experience, talking about the mental aspect, intensity, the pump, which Arnold's really big on. And again, outdatedness a lot of times, as a lot of studies have shown, the pump doesn't necessarily correlate to muscle growth. Talks about things such as pain and muscle soreness and the differences between the two. A great chapter here, one of my favorites, is one that talks about the gym. It talks about how gyms really exploded over the years. It talks about what to look for in a gym, the different types of environment and atmospheres. And a lot of this is still really true today, comparing to a hardcore gym to something like Planet Fitness. Again, this covers pretty much everything front to back. It talks about training in gyms for non-competitors. It talks about training at home. The next chapter on here, Getting Started, just talks about what you need to do in order to improve, obviously. Fast versus slow developers. And here you actually see a picture of Arnold at age 16, talking things about free weights and machines. So again, these are all common questions that still come up today. This book does a very interesting job of explaining those differences. It also talks about equipment stuff, such as shoes, gloves, straps. Again, nothing really new. So one of the things that's really interesting to me when you can correlate this to today's questions is a lot of the questions people have today are the same questions people had 20, 30 years ago. There's nothing new. So when you ask people or try to find, what's the best exercise, or what's the best for this, or what's the best for that, it really comes down to the tried and true things that happened and worked 20 to 30 years ago still work today. There's no magic pill necessarily to get the results that you want to see. And that takes care of book one. So book one is just a basic introduction to bodybuilding, the mindset, the gym, and what you'll need to prepare for in order to bring you into the next part of this book, which is training programs. Now with this training, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for most people. He does make a great point in here talking about basic training principles, how most people should start off with some kind of strength training routine to begin before actually moving into a full bodybuilding type routine or split. Talks about a lot of things here: individuals' needs, progressive resistance, reps, training to failure. Again, all subjects that we're familiar with: warming up, full range of motion, quality of contraction. Talks about power training. Here you see Franco Columbu deadlifting. Although this is a very big book and there's a lot of stuff to read, it always does add in pictures as well too, to kind of get you in that mindset. Not only are they informational, educational, but a lot of times they're motivational too. So here it goes through some stretching exercises. Again, does a really thorough job of covering everything. Chapter 2 on here talks about learning your body type. This is definitely something that I would like to do a video on, because a lot of times when you guys ask me questions about stuff, you start off by saying, I'm an ectomorph, I'm a mesomorph, I'm an endomorph. Now, Arnold's big on this and knowing your body type, not so much myself, because I feel like depending on the level of work and if you figure out what works for you, it's very easy to transform your body type. And that being said, it's a very short chapter and most of it is just pictures showing you different examples of people, talks a little bit about metabolism, talks about specific training based off of body type. So if you're one of the people who really believe in this, this might be beneficial to you. And then finally we get into the actual basic training program itself. Again, I'm not a big fan of his training style in this book, but they tell you about the basic muscle groups. Again, show you some pictures, breakdowns of all the muscles, talks about organizing your training, rest and recuperation. So it's thorough, but I just don't like the training split itself, and we'll get to that in just one second. So here you have the level 1 exercise program, and what it looks like, it is a 6-day split. So you're working out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you're hitting everything twice a week. And the way he has things grouped up, as you can see, Monday and Thursday, you'll hit chest, back with some power training and also do some abdominals. Tuesdays and Fridays, you're doing shoulders, upper arms, forearms, again, more abs. Wednesdays and Saturdays, you're doing, for the most part, your leg and lower back training. And then you take Sundays off and repeat this schedule. So it's pretty intense. It's a lot of volume for someone who's just getting beginning. He also does have a level 2 exercise program. Again, this one is very intense, and in some cases you're hitting everything 3 times per week. So on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, you're hitting chest, back, thighs, calves, abs. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you're hitting everything else. So a lot of volume, high frequency on these as well. I'm not really a big fan of that for most people. He does have a chapter on advanced training principles too, so talking about increasing training with intensity. Big J from Big J's Extreme Fitness can very much vouch for this. Check him out if you haven't checked out his channel already. But it talks about shocking your muscles, force reps, partial reps, isolation training. Talks about negatives, force negatives, cheating, heavy duty methods, power training principles such as staggered sets, priority principles, supersets, drop sets. All of this stuff talks about all different ways to really amp up your training program. Chapter 5, Building a Quality Physique here, Advanced Training Program, gets into this. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a lot of this for you. What this is right here is if you want to train twice a day in separate sessions. He has an AM and PM setup. Again, for most natural competitive lifters, this is just going to be way too much workload for you. I would not suggest it. He also does a great job of talking about competition training programs. So again, Big J's from Big J's Extreme Fitness recently did a video series on this, but he talks about how your training should be when you're preparing to compete in a bodybuilding show. Fear of smallness, something that we can all relate to, of course, here. Elements of competition training, talks about what you need to focus on. Talks about training partners, your training volumes, which exercises you should be doing, as well as your split. Chapter 7 over here, again, one of my favorite chapters in here, talking about mind over matter and mind the most powerful tool. Talks about the mental aspect of working out and bodybuilding. Lots of good information in here. Talks about goal setting. Of course, Conan the Barbarian. Also Predator down here. Great movies if you haven't seen them already. Also Running Man, Commando. Arnold does a lot of great movies. They're not the best story-wise, but action-wise and entertainment value is very high in a lot of them. And that brings us to book 3, which is body part exercises. So this starts talking about the actual exercises that we'll be doing. So it talks about splitting everything up. Of course, you have shoulders, information on them. Shows you great examples of bodybuilders and their shoulders. And it goes through a list for each body part. Talks about training, specific training, advanced training, competition program for each. So it goes through all these different muscle groups. A lot of great information in here. The exercises itself. And it does this like I said. So next we have chest. Goes through all of chest. Arnold's known for having a really great solid chest, especially being a bigger guy with longer arms. We have back as well. The arms. Kevin Levrone. The thighs, calves. Again, this is a big weak point for a lot of people. This has a lot of great information about calf training in here. Ab training. Which brings us into book 4, which is competition. And it goes through posing information. So a lot of people have question on posing. You know, this is one of the big reasons why people work with coaches to learn posing. This has a lot of great information about posing, history of posing, learning by observing, how it's actually an art form. So if you've ever seen Pumping Iron, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco Columbu, at the very beginning they start in a ballet class and they're learning about form and technique. And here you have Arnold at a very young age posing. Talks about judging and how things are looked at and some results. Lee Priest. Next chapter in this is about preparation, posing trunks. Again, does a really good job being very thorough. Tanning parlors and sun lamps, artificial tans, all sorts of stuff. So even though this book is older, it does talk about a lot of still relevant stuff today. Hairstyle even. Matt Ogus, I think you can attest to this. Competition strategy and tactics. And then book 5, we start talking about health, nutrition, and diet. Now with this again, I would say this is out of date as far as information it goes on here. He really sticks towards a lot of clean foods per se, when in reality you don't necessarily need clean foods as most people would describe it. What it comes down to is, you know, your macronutrients, your caloric intake and whatnot. That does talk about this as well. Basic nutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats. Talks about the different types of protein, the best sources, grains and seeds, carbohydrates, all sorts of information in here that can be very valuable. It also talks about weight control, gaining muscle, losing fat, body composition, ketosis, all sorts of stuff. Different kinds of diets are all in here. Calculating your own BMR, growth hormones, drug testing. It really does a good job. Injuries and how to treat them, dealing with injuries.
So there you go. There's the book in total, a brief overview of this massive book. It's about 800 pages in total. Again, not necessarily the most relevant information today, knowing what we know now. However, it does a great job of covering a little bit of everything from A to Z. With most information out there, it's all about reading and processing and digesting it yourself and coming up with your own conclusions or going off of research that you've seen. Again, the training programs in here aren't the best, the diet plans aren't the best, but they're his take and what was most effective for him. Now, the cost of this book is roughly $25 if you buy it new. However, you can find it used for much cheaper, as well as if you know your way around the internet, you might be able to find it for even cheaper, if you know what I'm saying. But I think it's a staple in any true bodybuilder's personal library, and it's a great source of information, if not just to look at the pictures and get motivated that way. As always, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Stay big.